Today's notes are focused on the quadratic formula. Once again, I just wanted to give us an extra day to practice using it and to make sure that we memorize this equation. You're going to want to know this equation in Algebra 2 next year, so we want to make sure that we have it memorized. Let's just review real quick. So we're still solving these equations using the quadratic formula. When we solve quadratic equations, what is it that I'm really asking you to do? I'm asking you to find the x-intercepts, or you can also call them your zeros, and you can also call them roots. So we're trying to find those x-intercepts or roots or zeros. Those all mean the same thing in this case. So what is the quadratic formula? The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And remember, a, b, and c come from standard form, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's go ahead and use this equation with some examples. Example 1, our equation is 9x squared plus 9x squared equals 4 plus 7x. So before we solve these equations, we always want to make sure that they're equal to 0. I prefer to keep my 9x squared, that term, positive if I can. So I'm going to subtract the 4 and the negative 7x to both sides, just so they'll both be on the left-hand side with that 9x squared. So 9x squared minus 7x minus 4 equals, this side cancels, and we're left with 0. So using 9x squared minus 7x minus 4 equals 0, a would be 9, b is negative 7, and c is negative 4. So now let's set up our quadratic formula. So setting up the quadratic formula, we would have x is equal to the negative of negative 7 plus or minus the square root of negative 7 squared minus 4 times 9 times negative 4. And notice I'm extra careful in putting all my negatives in parentheses so I can keep track of them. And that's all over 2 times 9, or 2 times a. So now we're ready to simplify that quadratic formula. So I'm just going to bring my work down here, and I'm going to start simplifying it. We got it set up. Let's go ahead and finish the equation. X equals, remember we always want to make sure we have the x equals out in front because we are solving for our x values, the x values of our x-intercepts. The negative of negative 7 is positive 7 plus or minus the square root. Negative 7 squared is positive 49. Then negative 4 times 9 would be negative 36. And negative 36 times negative 4 is positive 144. All over 2 times 9, which is 18. So x is equal to 7 plus or minus the square root of 144 plus 49 is 193 all over 18. All right, so is there a square root of 193? 193, what's 13 times 13? 169, what's 14 times 14? 196. So 193 does not have a perfect root. But we've already learned how to simplify radicals in Algebra 1. I'm pretty sure we did that before distance learning. So we need to see if we can simplify the square root of 193. And So I'm pretty sure that the square root of 193 can't be simplified further. So because of that, we are actually going to leave our answer in this form. So if I split this up into its two answers, it would look like x equals 7 plus the square root of 193 all over 18. And then x is equal to 7 minus the square root of 193 all over 18. So these two fractions cannot be simplified any further, so we're going to leave our answers like this. So there are two ways that you can write your final answer. You can leave it as x equals 7 plus or minus the square root of 193 over 18. Or you can write it as x is equal to 7 plus the square root of 193 all over 18 and 7 minus the square root of 193 all over 18. So you can separate them and list them as two separate answers, or you can leave them as one with that plus or minus in between, letting us know that they actually are, in fact, two separate answers. So let's go ahead and do example 2 together. So in example 2, we want to make sure that y is 0, so 0 is equal to 5x squared minus 80. Before we solve a quadratic equation, we want to make sure that it's equal to 0. So now we need to identify a, b, and c. So recall that we're using 0 equals ax squared plus bx plus c to identify a, b, and c. So a is the coefficient of x squared, so a is 5. B, well, bx is missing. There's no bx term in the middle here. So what would that make b? That actually makes b equal to 0. I'll show you why in just a second. Then c is our constant, negative 80. So the reason why that b is 0 is because you would have 0 equals 5x squared plus 0x plus, just kidding, minus 80. So what's 5x squared plus 0x? Well, isn't 0 times anything 0? So this whole term would just drop out. And you would be left with 0 equals 5x squared minus 80. So because there's no bx term, we know that b is actually 0. So let's go ahead and plug these values into our equation. So we're going to have x is equal to the negative of b, so negative 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 0 squared, minus 4ac, so negative 4 times 5 times negative 80, all over 2 times a, which is 5. So x is equal to, the negative of 0 is just 0, plus or minus 0 squared is 0, so the square root of 0. And then negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. And then negative 20 times negative 80 would be a positive 160 all over 10. So x is equal to, we would have 0 plus or minus the square root of 160 all over 10. So now I'm going to come up here. So x is equal to 0 plus or minus the square root of 160 should be, let's see, the square root of 16 is 4, but 40 times 40 is not 160. So it looks like we actually need to break that down and see if we can simplify it. All over 10. So 160 is really 16 times 10. So x is equal to 0 plus or minus the square root of 16 is really 4 times 4, and 10 is 2 times 5. Well, we have a group of 2 4s, so remember when you simplify radicals, that means you can bring a 4 out in front of the radical, all over 10. So x is equal to 0 plus or minus 4 times the square root of, and then there's no more groups of 2, so we're just going to simplify 2 times 5 is 10, all over 10. All right, so now we have two answers. We're going to split them up here. So x is equal to 0 plus 4 root 10 over 10. And x is equal to 0 minus, I did not leave myself enough room, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back and fix this real quick. So we would have x is equal to 0 plus 4 root 10 over 10. X is equal to 0 minus 4 root 10 over 10. So 0 plus 4 root 10 would just be 4 root 10. over 10. And then we can actually simplify this because 4 over 10, 4/10 can be reduced by 2 over 2. So 4 divided by 2 would be 2. 10 divided by 2 would be 5. So this is really 2 root 10 over 5. Then this one would be 0 minus 4 root 10 would be negative 4 root 10 over 10. Again, we can reduce negative 4 and 10 by 2, so this would become negative 2 root 10 over 5. Then you can write your final answer as x is equal to 2 root 10 over 5 and negative 2 root 10 over 5. Or because these are the same, one's positive and one's negative, you can combine them into one, so it'd be x is equal to plus or minus 2 root 10 over 5. So you can write your answer this way or the second way, whichever one you prefer. I'm just going to move that down so it's a little neater. So why don't you go ahead and give example 3 a shot on your own, press pause on the video, and then press play when you're ready to check your work again. Go for it. So I went ahead and worked out example 3 for us. I identified my A, my B, and my C, and then I plugged them into the quadratic formula. So let's talk about how I simplified this. So the negative of 8 is negative 8. 8 squared becomes 64. Negative 4 times 1 times 12 is negative 48. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So we have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of, then 64 minus 48 becomes 16, and it's still all over 2. So the square root of 16 is nice and easy for us to deal with. That simplifies to 4. So I have x is equal to, I split my answers into 2, and I have negative 8, x equals negative 8 plus 4 over 2. And then I also have x is equal to negative 8 minus 4 over 2. So negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4 over 2. Negative 8 minus 4 is negative 12 over 2. These simplify to negative 2 and negative 6. So my answers are x equals negative 2 and negative 6. When we graph this parabola, we're going to see it hit the x-axis at negative 2 and negative 6. And that's all for this week.